So in the first module, we were looking at the relationship between mindfulness and compassion and how that really helps to explore the inquiry process. And I developed this model to be able to look at that in a lot more detail. So this model is actually on the course as an image, so you might want to refer to it alongside this presentation that I'm doing. So I developed this model, which is called the Compassionate Mindful Inquiry Model, and it's in the shape of an iceberg, and that's because often the tip of the iceberg is what we're doing at the beginning of doing teaching and guiding practice, and then doing inquiry. And then as we proceed through this model, which I'm going to talk about in a little while, what we start to learn gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So everything that's beneath the surface is much bigger than the tip of the iceberg. So where we start is with mindfulness. So the first stage is encouraging our clients to stop, to pay attention and become aware of the experience in that present moment. So they're coming out of autopilot. So through the inquiry process, we're teaching people what happens, what does it feel like, what happens in your mind or in your body when you come out of autopilot, and just tune in to what's happening in the body, heart, mind, and the external environment. So this is the very first process from the stage of paying attention and becoming aware. So once we have inquired into that with really open, soft, gentle, curious questions, we can take them through to the next stage when they're ready. And the next stage is to talk to them about what happened when they became aware. And this involves a process of noticing, of exploring beneath the superficial experiences and identifying their patterns. And through that identification of patterns and habits, then they can create new resources and it helps to promote resilience. So they now know what they have experienced through paying attention, and we ask questions such as, well, when you noticed that, how did that feel? So when you noticed you had pain in your knee, for example, how did that feel emotionally for you? So it's that kind of question that we're doing here through the stage of dialogue. The process that arises from that is noticing and exploring. And once we have helped them with that through the inquiry process, we can move on to the third stage, which is linking. We're linking the inner and the outer experiences and a host of other things. We're linking these two stages and we're linking their understanding of themselves in a more holistic, wholesome way. So we're inviting them through the inquiry process to look at that learning from before and how that can be linked to their everyday life, to really promote health and well-being and understanding of themselves, and to start to give them choices as to how to live their lives in a very different way, to make positive choices. So this is all mindfulness, as you can tell, but very often when we get to this stage through awareness and noticing, it can be a place of rawness, of vulnerability, and often there's a sense of what's next, what can I do with that? Because in being mode, it's learning, acceptance, and awareness and that sort of thing, which is really very valuable. But what do we do with that rawness and the vulnerability and all the other habits and things that we've seen that perhaps we don't like so much and would like to change? So for me, this isn't enough. This can actually be quite dry and it doesn't take you as far as perhaps you can go. So this is why the model then moves around to self-compassion. So when you start to explore with your client their critical thinking perhaps, the way that they're seeing themselves, their relationship with themselves, instead of being critical and berating themselves or feeling guilty or selfish or whatever, bringing a sense of self-compassion to that experience. So this is where compassion starts to come in, and it's called wise action. So we go from being to doing, but a real compassionate doing. And that can involve self-soothing phrases or making a positive choice about what to do in that situation. So it's very, very gentle It's very kind, very nurturing, and really promoting self-care. So initially, that's a really useful part of the process. But following on from that, from number 4 to number 5, the next process that arises is actually through that self-soothing, we can start to encourage our clients to change their habits, to really start to live their lives in a very, very different way. And that helps to change their behaviour and their relationship to themselves and with their lives that they're living. So they start to make different choices and they test the water. So they find out what that feels like to behave in a slightly different way. And this can actually be quite wobbly for them. It can cause a little bit of dissatisfaction or unease, and that's just part of the process. It needs to happen. So once this has been experienced for quite some time, what happens ultimately is it leads to sustainable change. So that a new sustainable way of living life rises to the surface, impacting on the relationships with themselves and with other people. So that might be their personal relationships, it might be at work or socially or whatever. And so these things start to become embedded in their lives and starts to become their norm, which is fantastic. But I have made this into a cyclical model because when we start to notice that we can change one aspect of our relationship with ourselves or with other people through the identification of habits, developing coping strategies, and new ways of being, we can then see actually there's a whole vast change that we can make with so many other areas of our lives. So we go from encouraging them to really notice that those changes that have happened, to flag it up through inquiry, to recognising, if we pay attention to something else, then that really can help to enhance life. And the cycle just goes round and round. So that sounds all very linear in a way, but actually there are different processes around this, which is absolutely, that's what's so exciting about it, is that it looks like it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but often somebody might get to the wobbly bit of 5 and feel they need to then bring in mindfulness to be anchored and grounded again, so they can go back round if they wish to. So the model is something to work with. It provides a framework and is really helpful for starting the inquiry process and recognising that this is where we begin and this is the aim of where we're getting to, with one aspect of what they're recognising as a habit and a way of being in their lives, but that can start again and go round forevermore, which is just the joy of this work and really helps to enrich life and promote health and well-being.